Then it's my turn to welcome everyone to the fifth PostDoc, the fifth alumni PostDoc, and the second PostDoc of this second season. I'm Johanna Stadlbauer of the PostDoc office, and on behalf of the organizing team, which consists of me and Martina Meyer-Kraus, I welcome you all, most of all our two experts today, to this talk about the links between biology and mathematics and whatever else will turn up between Florian Müller and Federica Caforio when they will talk with each other. And we're really excited to have both of you here. Florian Müller, biophysicist, currently in Paris, and Federica Caforio, mathematician, currently in Graz, I assume. Yes, very good. And just for everyone's information, this talk is being recorded, but only the part where the two experts talk with each other. And if anyone who is now listening wants to ask questions, you can type them in the chat during the interview itself, and you can also talk later. After about 40 minutes of interview, there will be time for questions. And now, Tina, would you say a short welcome?
Yeah, hi and welcome. I'm Tina from the alumni office. Great to have you here. I only would like to draw your attention to the fact that we have there is an international alumni network. At the moment, we have about 30 alumni groups all over the world, and these groups, we call them chapters, are organized by volunteers, former students, and former graduates of our university. And they offer local support and act as a contact person in this region for other graduates, and they also organize events. And so Florian does for more than 10 years now. Thank you for supporting us, Florian. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your knowledge today. Thank you. And Federica too.
Thanks, Tina. And the goal of this alumni post-talk is really to showcase the innovative research that postdocs in Graz do, and also the innovative researchers that this university has already produced, and also show the university's commitment to alumni relations. And this will become very apparent when I introduce both of our experts today. And I will start with Florian Müller, live from Paris, and thank you very much for being here. So Florian Müller is a trained biophysicist and staff scientist at Institut Pasteur Paris. He develops integrated approaches combining fluorescence imaging, computerized image analysis, and mathematical modeling, which is something he shares with Federica. The goal of Florian's work is to contribute to a better understanding of biological processes, currently related to gene expressions, which is why the talk today is called Understanding Genes with Mathematics. Florian Müller holds a Master of Science in Computational Physics from the University of Graz and a PhD from Graz University of Technology and National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, USA. For his PhD, he researched the in vivo binding properties of nuclear proteins by combining live cell fluorescence microscopy and mathematical modeling. And Florian Müller did a postdoc. That was when he moved to Paris, and he worked at the École Normale Supérieure and at Institut Pasteur on gene regulation. Right now, he is a staff scientist, a permanent staff scientist interested in tissue architecture. And as Tina already said, he leads the alumni chapter Paris. And Florian, was that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm glad. I had to have both of the experts' help in writing these biographies because they come not natural to me as an anthropologist, but still it's very interesting what you both did. And Federica Caforio, to introduce her, works one floor below me at the Institute of Mathematics and Scientific Computing at our university in Graz. Her current focus lies in the personalization of electromechanical models of cardiac function and circulation, and it combines physics-based and data-driven methods. Federica holds a PhD in applied mathematics from the Paris-Saclay University in France, where she was part of the INRIA project team M3 Is that correct? Yes.
Yes, it is called medicine, but it is written.
I see. Oh, yes.
Because it's mathematical, modeling, and mechanical.
Very good. And there she worked with Dominique Chapelle and Sébastien Imperial. Her PhD focused on the mathematical analysis and the numerical simulation of elastic wave propagation in soft tissues with an application to cardiac ultrasound elastography. Federica's master degree is in applied mathematics from the University of Trento in Italy, during which she did a research stay at the MRI Institute in Detroit, USA, and an internship at the Weierstrass Institute for Applied Analysis and Stochastics in Berlin. And here you can already see the geographical connections between Florian and Federica as well. And very soon you will hear the content research-wise connections between the two. And again, we're really happy that both of you agreed to share your experience and expertise. And I will now become invisible alongside Tina, and I'll give the floor over to Federica to moderate this talk and to ask Florian questions. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Johanna, and thank you, Martina, for the nice invitation and very nice introduction. And good afternoon, Florian. Good afternoon. Hi again. I think I would start because we already had a nice introduction, but maybe you can somehow summarize how did you get to your position there? So which were the main steps that were really important and meaningful for you?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you as well for the introduction and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about my experience. So as it was said before, I did my master's at the University of Graz, which was already kind of interdisciplinary. It was a program called computational physics, with courses from different departments, which was interdisciplinary and kind of started, I think, my journey that I'm still engaged on. So there were a lot of different topics that were touched on, and we actually also started taking courses at the Technical University as Wahlpflichtfach. So I got actually interested in different areas, not only physics but also biology, and that all we did for my master thesis actually. So there was a mathematical modeling of an imaging approach. My first experience to look at biology, it was only theoretically. And that was already at the Technical University together with the University of Graz. And then there was sheer coincidence that at the same time, there was actually an American scientist at the Graz the university where I did my master's. And I discussed with him, we got along, and we came up with this idea that we could actually join his lab as a PhD student, while being enrolled in the PhD program of the Technical University of Graz. And that gave me the opportunity to move to the US, to the National Institutes of Health, which is the biggest biomedical research institution in the United States. And that was a unique chance for me because there is really top-notch science done on many different levels. But at the same time, I could also keep contact with the Technical University of Graz and actually maintain a collaboration with the professor there. So it explains why my PhD then ended up being between two institutions across the Atlantic. And this started really to be interdisciplinary. So there was microscopy, there was data analysis, but I also started actually doing lab work in pipetting and working with cells, which was extremely satisfying for me because I could actually generate my own data. So rather than depending on somebody else, it was my own data that I analyzed, which helped me to understand limitations and shortcomings that otherwise I think would have been really hard to judge if you don't know how the experiments are done. So my PhD went very well. I continued with a short postdoc. And then I got a little bit homesick, so to speak. Home became slightly larger than I thought before. So rather than Graz or Austria, Europe became kind of the destination, also because I met my wife in the US who is French. So we thought it was clear we want to move back to Europe. Two scientists, it's not so easy to actually find a job because we work in different domains, as you also know, Federica, I think. Paris then just turned out to be the perfect spot for us because France is very centralized. So if there is good research, certainly not only in Paris, but you're going to find a lot of things in Paris, especially in the domains we are working in. So we both came back for postdoc and had the chance to work at the École Normale Supérieure, continuing this interdisciplinary journey of combining biology, microscopy, and data analysis. And was lucky enough to be involved in projects that were productive in terms of publications, which then allowed me to apply for a permanent position, which is rather unique in France. Because it provides kind of a scientific mid-layer. So you don't have to be a PI, you don't have to become a professor, you're a staff scientist. So you work in a group, you have maybe a few people that work with you, but you are not responsible for structure, at least not at the beginning. And I was lucky enough to get a position like this, and it's actually for life. So I'm the equivalent of a Beamter almost. So, which is very nice because I can focus on more high-risk projects and I don't have to worry about my salary for the rest of my life if everything goes according to plan. That's where I'm standing right now. It's actually a very satisfying position because I have a few students, I can work on things that are interesting to me. I have a small group that is embedded in a bigger structure. So that's where I'm currently standing, and it was really all started with this interdisciplinary training, I think, at the University of Graz, and also these interactions they were very easily established with the technical university, which was very unique.
So if you consider the most important decision that you took, would you say it was going to the US or coming back to France?
I would say the one that was both, but probably the one that shaped my life the most was going to the US, because it was somewhat quick. Because in June I met the person who then became my PhD supervisor. In August I was already in the US. It was something that happened within a few months, and it was not actually really planned. I didn't plan on moving to the US. And then I was at the beginning. It was scary, I have to say, because you start from zero. So it was on one side very stimulating because you don't know anybody. So you rebuild yourself, your social network. People just know you from that moment on. So you have no old friends. And it just opened the door to just so many opportunities afterwards. And NIH is just incredibly international. So at the beginning, it was just so funny to have dinners with 10 people where you have 4 continents and 10 different nationalities. So it really changed. I grew up in Vorarlberg in Vilkirch, and this is not the most international of all places. So all of a sudden, there were just friends from all over the world. Continents and countries just didn't mean much anymore. So I would say it was probably the most eye-opening move was going to the US, both personally and also professionally. But I think especially personally, you just get so substantially wider horizon. So that was really, I think, a key decision in my life, and I'm really glad I did it.
I think also speaking from my personal experience, going abroad and studying again from scratch is such a great experience you can do personally. You grow up so quickly. Sometimes, of course, you have some hard moments or some tough periods where, okay, I need to start again, and maybe you need to find a flat. Maybe after 2 weeks you need to find a flat again because there are some problems, or you're on your own. But I would highly recommend to do experience abroad, because it's just, as you said, so eye-opening, and you get so much and back.
That's why I tell also the students, it's like, if you have the chance to go somewhere else, just do it. Even if it's professionally, it's maybe not the first decision you might want to do, but personally, it's extremely rewarding, and it just changes the perspective you have on a lot of things, because I think you also appreciate substantially more what you have back home if you see how it's somewhere else. And I think it's extremely rewarding.
I think you appreciate what you have in your home country, like culturally speaking, but you are also able to put it into a new perspective. And so if something that was very clear to you, then you just realize there are other ways of doing or thinking about things, and which are true, which are also worth. And you just realize there is not one truth or one way of doing stuff. You get much more tolerant as well, and much more really open-minded. And I think it's something that, of course, pays personally, but also professionally speaking. You realize really that you have other perspectives and other ways of doing or thinking, and this is just so important, especially in the current situation, like socially speaking, and in academia. It's really something.
I think also professionally, because you interact with people from different nationalities, and there's just so many the ways people interact. There are cliches, of course, but people from different countries have a different way of interacting. So my US lab in the US, it was small, but an American boss, me, an Italian postdoc, and postdoc from Japan. So it was, at the beginning, it was just funny how communication patterns established, because the Japanese postdoc was just never daring to speak up, because he was the new arrival. He was used to hierarchy, and as cliche dictated, the postdoc from Italy. Are you still here?
Yes.
Yeah. And the postdoc from Italy was just very bubbly. So we had this, it was very funny to just, it took a while. Then there was language problems. So it was just, and what's nice about it is you can just learn to be tolerant and listen to people and let them independently of their background. So I think it teaches so much about professional interaction, but also about personal interactions.
I wanted to ask you, like, speaking about social interactions, how important do you think your network, like the network you build and the network you are in, is important? And do you have any tricks or tips?
Yeah, I'm not the best at networking, unfortunately, but it's absolutely crucial. I think it helps you to plan next career moves. In science, as you also do it, you're working extremely in a collaborative setting. So knowing people that work in a domain that's interesting for you to find expertise, people that can help you to advance your project is absolutely key. Getting feedback, also finding opportunities for students. That's something I'm now more and more confronted with, people that come for short periods to your lab. They want to move on, and I strongly feel that as a PhD supervisor or a postdoc supervisor, you have responsibility that goes beyond just the training, but also trying to open doors for afterwards. So the bigger your network is, the more people you know, the more closely you know, the easier it is to propose next career moves for people that put their trust in you in order to get trained, in order to move on. So it's absolutely key. I guess COVID has been a challenge because of reduced attendance to conferences. Traveling was harder. Also now conferences are more in a hybrid format. Mm-hmm. So it's, I think it's going to take some time to get started again for some people, but it's also fun if you go to a conference and meet people that you actually know. Much more entertaining to discuss scientific people. You can see the friends, and you can also get honest feedback about what you do. So it's network is key.
And did you have a mentor during your studies, or what was your experience? Did you have someone like supporting you, not necessarily your boss, but some?
I think it was lucky enough that, and I realized it afterwards that that's not always the case, that my supervisor in the US kept a very small lab on purpose. So he wanted to have only a few people. We are 4 or 5. And he had this American open door policy. So the door was open. You could go in there and you could chat. And we had the running gag in the lab. If you don't want to work, just talk to Jim. Because he was just, it started off with a scientific discussion, and it drifted off in philosophical discussions about the science, our purpose in the scientific community. So I would really consider him to be extremely influential in the way also he handled conflicts, the few conflicts we had in the lab, or periods that were difficult for me professionally because projects didn't work. He was really there on so many levels. There could be small technical questions, but also the bigger ones when you as a student you just don't see the forest anymore because of all the small little trees. He was the one who saw the forest. So I would say that he was the one who had really the most profound impact on me, and is kind of maintained my role model of how I hope that I can be a mentor for my students. So one thing also is that I want to really maintain a really small group for this, because I want to avoid having students working with me that are frustrated because I'm not available. So I was lucky. I think this is not always the case that you have this. So in France, they have a system of tutors, where PhD students can have a tutor, another person they trust. This can work, but it must not always work. But I think having somebody that you can rely on, not only on the hard scientific questions, but also how to plan a project, how to decide when things are not moving well, how to do next. More kind of the soft skill side, I think it's super important.
And did you try or experience also peer mentoring, or is it something that you do now? Like, for example, in my experience, I was also very lucky enough that my PhD supervisors were always there for me if I needed. And also, as Johanna also said, in my PhD in a area, in a research center that is called area, that is research center for applied mathematics and informatics. And there the structure is in team projects, and every team has a very good ratio of permanent positions and PhDs, so that all PhDs are supervised. That every permanent researcher has no more than 4 or 5 PhD. So I was really well supervised, but also something that I realized afterwards was really good was this peer mentoring. So how, as PhD students or with postdocs, we could support each other. And that is something that there are also relationships that you build, and that it will be the network of tomorrow, because then if you start with your peers now, I mean, if you want to stay in academia, but also if you want to go to the private sector, you realize you grow with these people, and then you get collaborators. The network is not necessarily with your supervisor or like people that have already permanent positions, but I think these connections with your peers are really, really helpful and precious. So what was your experience with that?
I think I couldn't agree more with this, because we all believe we remain eternally young, which we just don't. So it's now former colleagues of mine. Not all of them remained in science. Some of them do something completely different. But some of them became PIs. Some of them are extremely successful. But those were the guys that were suffering in quotation marks doing their PhD alongside with me. So your peer is going to be important in the future as well. Peer mentoring, for me, I had always a healthy exchange with my colleagues. We worked on similar aspects, so there were a lot of discussions. With a few of them I'm in touch because we remain in the same area. It was not actively enforced by the structures I was working in. But I work with groups that there are larger scale PhD programs where multiple PhD students were recruited at the same time with the goal of actually building something like this. And I think it's especially nice with kind of interdisciplinary programs where it's something we discussed already the first time we spoke. When you have people who come from different domains that might at the beginning not know how to actually talk to each other. So if a mathematician, a microscopist, and a biologist starts off like a joke, but people might not even understand each other at the beginning because they use the same language, but they don't mean the same thing. So I think having more informal exchange among PhD students or postdocs could really help that they grow together scientifically and also teach each other substantial aspects of their own work. It's something that a mentor probably cannot do in terms of limitations of time. So when we have international kind of interdisciplinary projects right now, I really try to motivate the students that they have exchanges. They go beyond just the meetings we have. All of us would say, but just talk to each other, make journal clubs, discuss the science among yourselves. Don't wait always for the PIs to step in because it might just not happen on a frequent basis. So I try to motivate our students to do this, and then it also depends a little bit on the personalities because not everybody gets along. But I think it's a very rich way of interacting and learning substantially more. Yeah. So you had this. So at the INRIA, it was, as you said, so that's a system that's, is it motivated by the INRIA or is it something that naturally grows?
I don't think it is like structurally motivated by the research center. I think it was just the feeling and like it was a good atmosphere, a very, very good atmosphere, and it just happened, and we just grew up together. And I think when you have positive energy, it just pops up that you support each other, and we had a lot of activities just to help each other and to get information, also travel, and it was just a very nice chemistry. I don't know how to describe it, but I think it was really like also the fact that you have such a well-structured lab, and of course it is also the initiatives of the team leader that made this also consolidate and happen. But I think it was really like happening at the bottom level, like at the level of students that there was just such a nice feeling, such a nice atmosphere that we helped each other. And I see now, for example, at the level of postdoc at the University of Graz, there are also initiatives of peer mentoring, and I think they're really, really fruitful, really, really precious. And that's why I think the sooner this happens, the nicer and fruitful it is, because we all make failures, errors, and we all have, as we were also saying last time, there is no one way to success or no one way to make things. There are different experiences, that are different characters, different priorities, and different ways of achieving what you want to achieve. So it is nice to get support and perspectives from other people, especially at the student level, so that or at your peer level, so that you can better shape how your strategy. And so that's something that I would highly recommend. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you also, did you you said that you've met your future PhD supervisor, but then did you arrange scholarship to go to the US, or afterwards did you have to proactively find scholarships, or how did it work? Do you have any tips for students?
Yeah, so I think for the US, unfortunately, I have no advice because I was in an extremely lucky situation that the NIH is a government institution that provides funding. So I came there and I knew that my salary was taken care of, so I didn't have to apply for any funding. To come back to Europe and France, I then I got an initial funding for a few months to get started from the lab that was hosting me, and then I had to look for my own money, which I think is a good exercise because it means that you have to write your own research proposal, which is always good because you have to think about what you want to do, what are potential results, how you are going to handle failure, what are backup strategies, something you're going to do as a scientist for the rest of your life, essentially. So on a smaller scale, and that I'm doing actually ever since. So I got my postdoc funding, and now I'm applying for bigger grants to find money for the people who are going to work for me. But yes, it was the typical European or French funding agencies that I tried, varying success. But the level of a postdoc, this is actually often the case that either even in order to join the lab or in order to stay longer, you're going to be asked to write your own.
And get ready for failure and for not accepted grants.
Yeah, I think
maximize.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also science can be a little bit brutal because you put a lot of heart and soul and energy in those funding requests, and you might not always get very nice comments. Either because people didn't like it, they might not understand it, they don't have so much time to read it, they have to give feedback. So it can be hurtful, especially if you go through this exercise the first time. All can go well, but there is no guarantee. And the problem is that just way more people that apply than the funds that are available. So there has to be some selection. And unfortunately, not everybody is very nice. So you can get really nasty comments, which I think is it's a pity because you can not like a project, but you still be aware of that the person writing is it's a person. So you can be nice and negative, but that's not always the case. So it's the same thing for papers. You get reviews back. You have to. That's what I tell the students. Don't take it personal. It can be frustrating. But it's unfortunately it's often a blind process. The reviewers, they are protected. Nobody knows who they are. So that's also some people just write without filters. It's unfortunately part of the job. So I think at one point you get a thicker skin. I'm still getting annoyed sometimes, but it's getting better.
Yeah, I think with experience you just cope with it, and as you said, not to take it personally and just let's start again.
Take it. I think there's a certain level of abstraction that you have to apply to say, well, if somebody, that's what I try to explain always. Is well, try to get the constructive part of the criticism. So if people don't like it, something, what can be improved, even if the formulation maybe of the feedback is negative, but what can we do to make this more convincing the next time? But it's easier for me to say this because it's not my only brainchild, so to speak, in the first paper that comes out of my PhD. So it's, but I remember when I got bad comments, I took it very badly at the beginning. But,
and you said interdisciplinarity is a key word in your academic and professional life. So you also told me your lab is really very interdisciplinary. So can you maybe tell everyone who are the people in your lab and how is this interdisciplinarity? How does it look like?
Okay, but I guess it's just it stems out of me just wanting to do everything, because I sometimes feel like I'm still a child. That's also why I love my job so much, because as a scientist, you're a researcher, you're looking for new things, and you don't know what's going to come out of it. So I think it's just fascinating. And in this interface of biology and physics, mathematics, we essentially work on biological questions with more or less biochemical approaches, imaging. Then we have the data that comes out of it that we have to analyze, and that then feeds back in the construction of the next set of experiments. So during my PhD, I tried to do most of this myself, but there are limitations, because as we also discussed before, you cannot be the expert in everything. So you're going to be kind of spread out and sometimes rather thin on multiple domains. And in the small group I'm currently heading, we have experts that cover essentially those aspects. So there's a PhD student that has a similar background to yours. So he applied mathematics, so he knew close to nothing about biology. We have a lab engineer who is an expert on wet lab experiments, so he knows close to nothing about mathematics. And then a postdoc who is her training was in material science. Now she works on infectious disease and immunology. So she's kind of the glue behind those projects. So we try to cover really everything from the wet lab biology on the bench to the analysis that can be really the latest deep learning approaches in a small team. And what's nice is that we start to establish a common language, so scientifically speaking, because the master student or the PhD student learns the biology, and the biologist to some degree the mathematics, and there's enough of an overlap to understand and appreciate what the other person is doing. It can be very often the naive and stupid questions, stupidly sounding questions, can be the ones that are eye-opening. So it's actually interesting discussions when the biologists ask, why do you analyze this and not like that? So I think it's very entertaining to see this and how we all grow together, because we also really try to have a culture of listening to each other and taking the questions of the other serious, even if it sounds naive. So it's quite a journey. It's fun. What's missing is a hardcore microscopist. So that's we are still outsourcing, but the rest we cover for the most part in our little team.
And what does it like? How is life in France? So how different from what you experience in the US or in Austria? Like not only interdisciplinary but also intercultural. What do you think?
Yeah, so I would say that, well, as I said before, I started off in Feldkirch, medium-sized town close to Switzerland, so not the most open of all places. Graz was already, was a big town for me at the time. NIH is in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and that was really in terms of international, just the eye-opener. It's a research campus with 30,000 people from all over the place. So I think it's hard to be more international. Then you have the World Bank, all kinds of international organizations. So that was just, it was just a melting pot from all over the place, all kinds of disciplines. In Paris, afterwards, is not a small town either. But it's less international in the US, I would say. It's maybe also I came in a later stage of my career where it was less. After 5 years in the US, you get kind of used to these international aspects, and it was more in the mode of settling down, I would say, or less curious. The change to the US was it was not so big finally after you get used to appreciate this international aspect because Washington DC it's not the Midwest, so it's a very open, eclectic place. Paris was harder to integrate, I would say, at the beginning because I didn't speak French at the beginning. So that is to establish life outside of the lab. That was, I think, if you want to stay longer, speaking French is really a key in France because English is better and better now. I think especially you see the younger generation. Hurts me to say this because it means I'm old, but you can really tell that the students coming in now, they're substantially better in English, I think, than it used to be a few years ago. But outside of the lab and this more international research environment, if you want to travel, I think France holds true to the cliche. If you speak French, it's just going to be so much easier. So,
if I may interrupt you, I think, okay, I have to say that I have a very high passion for foreign languages, but I really think if you plan to do a longer stay in a place, you absolutely need to learn the language of the place, because otherwise you will just feel a tourist for the whole time. And if you really want to learn the culture and really want to integrate, there's no way around. You will just have access to much more if you learn a language. Of course, it can be tough, especially if you don't learn it when you're a young and teenager, and then you also need to work, and then you have to learn the language at 10, 11 p.m. Yes. But I think you get so much more in back. So it's absolutely something that I would recommend.
I know, absolutely.
Especially in France.
But it was, for me, it was also, I thought there was a difference between France and the US. In the US, I think it's less important how well you speak English. So people were just curious and say, oh, you have a funny accent. Oh, you're from Austria. Oh, my grandmother thought about visiting Austria a few years ago. So it was very easy, a little bit less judgmental than I feel it's in France. So in France, if you start speaking French, people are easier to judge you. So I think there's a difference in culture in terms of how you're perceived as a foreigner. In France, there's also, at one point, it's now 10 years, 12 years, 13 years I'm here. There's kind of a barrier that's really hard to get through, which is a lot of cultural references. If you don't know the music, the movies that the people were watching, so there are a lot of references that I still don't get. Might be the same for you in Austria. There are certain references that are just, if you didn't grow up in a country, I think then it's really, for me, that's the one frontier that seems hard to break through currently. Which doesn't mean I don't feel welcome here, but there is still kind of sometimes I'm like, wow, I just don't know those movies. I don't know those songs from the 80s everybody's singing. I don't want to listen to them in the first place. So there's...
but I mean, it was stronger in France for me than here in Austria.
Okay, okay, so makes me feel better. I think it's definitely stronger in France than in the US, but maybe it's also, I think we're just exposed much more to American culture in terms of the music, the movies and things like this. France is extremely rich in terms of the music scene. It's incredible. The movies, I think they were very protective about their language since a long time. It's a certain culture. People are also very proud, rightfully so, which also means it's really part of the cultural identity. And something I think in Austria, we don't have the same rich music scene than in France. I think it's a difference in terms of how the government is.
Yeah. I have another question for you, and it is like, I mean, still like not really scientific wise, but more as a researcher. I know you have 3 kids, so how are you able to balance your work as a researcher and your family duties?
I think the person that would actually better be suited to answer this question is my wife, because she's a researcher as well, and so one of the reasons why we moved back to Europe was because we thought about having kids. And France, in a nutshell, has the advantage, which might be shocking for some, that maternity leave is relatively short, and afterwards you have, especially in bigger cities, an extremely well-established system of daycare or nannies. So, which meant that we actually got our first daughter in a period that was extremely stressful for both of us. We were transitioning to permanent positions, and maternity leave for my wife was only 3 months after she gave birth. And our kid, so Diana, our daughter, was in daycare all day, ever since. And the same thing holds true for the 2 daughters we got afterwards. They were actually born always at periods where it was really stressful. And that really helped us to have, I think, a very happy family, but still maintain a full work schedule. And for my wife, I think it was really key that she could rely also on the quality of the daycare, that she can really also then focus on her career advancement. Because I think for her, this was really, there would have been a decision to have kids or she advances in her career if this system would have not been in place. So it's surprising to some of my friends in Austria that it was so short in terms of maternity leave. But I think the kids developed very normally. I think we have a very healthy relationship. They love us. They recognize us. And it was really during a period where otherwise it would have been a binary decision. Either one of us sacrifices scientific career or we have kids, and we could actually maintain both. So we have 3 daughters, and both could actually succeed in what we hoped for in terms of science.
And I think this is really something that was very shocking for me, coming from Italy and having a French husband. So I was exposed to this cultural thing of 3 months after maternity leave, you just go back to work, or still very, very quickly. And in Austria, I discovered that there is another way of thinking and perceiving it. And that's why I said it was still open-minded for me. And that's why I chose something in between that was perfect for me. But it was very, very interesting for me to discover that here there is another length scale, another time scale for maternity leave, which still somehow hinders advance in career if you don't have so easily an option to put your kids in childcare when they're really young. Because if you don't have your family with you, you just don't have any other option than staying at home. So
exactly. Yeah. And for us, our respective families are relatively far away. So it remains a compromise, but in our case, it was just the solution that permitted us to do both, living a family and continuing doing what we love professionally.
If I have time, a last question, Johanna. Okay. And since I am related to this topic, did you experience any gender bias during your career or in the current structure of your team or during your studies?
I think it probably would fill hours of discussion potentially. I also talked about this with so the postdoc in our group. She's from Italy. So actually, after our last conversation, I talked with her about this, and I don't think I can say that I experienced gender bias because I'm a man. So for me, that was never an issue. What we have currently is certainly way more men in these hard science disciplines than females. So especially microscopy is still a domain. It's changing slowly, but there are certainly more men than women. And the question was, how could we really change this? How can we break this? And it was a very interesting discussion with Isabella because we actually ended up then discussing already things like what happens in high school. how can you just guarantee that girls like math and physics as much as boys? And I think that's maybe already one of the attacking angles to say, well, why do boys seem to be more attracted to math and physics in high school? I don't have the answer for it. And she mentioned that she's a friend who did a physics channel called Physics World, which is a big success on YouTube, specifically tailored to show physics for girls and make it interesting. So I think that's probably a first thing that really needs to be discussed in depth, and also taking into consideration how the psychology that might be different of boys and girls, not one being better than the other, but also how you talk to girls and how you motivate them to do math, and because then I think you're gonna have more students, more gender balance at the university. When I studied physics in Graz, there was one woman. There were 25 men and one woman. So this is automatically afterwards the pyramid is off. So if it's not 50-50, how can you guarantee that afterwards you're gonna have gender balance as PhD students, postdocs, PIs? So I think it's a very complex question that should already start really early on, and maybe start even earlier in high school. But I think what we see now in our lab, it's actually from our mathematical modelers, they're actually more female than men. Most of them come from Asia. I don't know why. But it's I think it's an extremely important question that I also ask myself, not only because I have 3 girls, just because I think it's just utterly unfair. We really try to also work on myself, because there's probably certain cliches that are still present that I'm not fully aware of. So I have frequent discussions with Isabella, who is really pointing me to certain studies where the psychology of all of this is also investigated, which is really fascinating, but also sad at the same time. So I don't have a good answer. I'm actively working on it for myself, and hopefully it's going to have some impact also at the institute I'm working with on currently.
I think there are 2 main aspects. First of all is the lack of role models. And the second is structural biases, as you also mentioned, that I think shall be destroyed before the level of high school. So really at primary school, because very often subjects are associated with some judgments. And so often girls don't like hard science because they don't think they're capable of them. Yeah, so they think they're too challenging, and they're just too complicated somehow, because these are structurally associated with, okay, this is harder. And so I think, and the fact that you're saying from Asia you have a more balanced thing, it means it is not a matter of genes, coming back to genes, but it's a matter of cultural structures that need absolutely to be destroyed somehow. Because also something that was eye-opening for me, I never experienced any judgment, or maybe because of my family or my surrounding environment, I never felt, okay, this is too difficult for me, this is too hard for me. I never felt it, or I always took everything as challenge, but never because of I was a female researcher or female student. But once in Austria it happened. I heard from a student, she wanted to do a bachelor in math, but she said, yes, but my family, my friends, they suggested I change the topic, change the curriculum, because it might be too hard for me because I'm female. And I was like, what are you saying? So I think there is really a big problem in West. I don't know if it is coming from smaller cities or Western countries with respect to Asian countries, or at a different level, but there is an urgent need to change this, and maybe starting also from our small environment, and show that this does not make any sense. And I think, That's
I
important matter.
I think this is interesting for both of you because both of you work with future generations of students and researchers, and both of you are parents and therefore will be faced with this issue from an early age on. And both of you might hire people, and then you need to get the best talent regardless of gender. And it is there are already for hiring committees, for departments, for companies, procedures in place how to find the best woman for the job, for example. And for example, when you have a professorship opening up in 2 years, for 2 years only invite women keynote speakers, women guest lecturers, and so on, so that you as an institution are very well received by an audience of talented researchers who are female, for example. And then that automatically serves the role model function that Federica said, as does the Women in Mathematics Association we have in Austria. They have this role model where they portray biographies of female mathematicians, and then you can see, wow, there are so many of them. When you see them, you suddenly get the idea that there are loads of female mathematicians, and they have wonderfully diverse backgrounds, and they have very interesting hobbies and do very interesting research. But so now I jumped into your discussion, and I thought this last topic was a very important one, and we didn't have any comments from the chat. If I would have asked a question, it would have been more about your tips for interdisciplinary working and success strategies. But I think this will have to wait for our next meeting, possibly. But I'm sure, Florian, you touched upon it. The terminology you use when a material science scholar is talking to a biologist. You have some work to do, and also career advice for people who embark on an interdisciplinary research career. That would also be very interesting to deepen. But I think we close this meeting, and I would leave some more minutes over for you for some closing remarks, and invite everyone who sees this to get in touch with both of you if there is anything that resonated with you. Both Federica and Florian, I think, are very approachable. Yeah, wonderful.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
over again to you, and from my side and from Tina's side, lots of thanks for sharing this hour with us. What are any final remarks that are important to you?
You want to go first?
Yes, of course. Maybe some final remarks is there to write for grants, for scholarships. Never think you will never get it, because if you don't try, of course you will never get it. And if you try, you will never lose your time, in terms of experience you get, personal enrichment, and who knows, maybe you get that scholarship and then you can go in this place, and then it may change your life, as it happened to Florian and as it happened to me. And there to change environment, there to meet new people, never be shy, and always embrace opportunities, because this is just in our experience, it was life-changing. So, and if you need any advice or any further tips, you will find already on the website of the University of Graz a lot of information for mobility, for exchanging opportunities, and you can of course also contact us for any further information.
I think I can just resonate what Federica just said. Getting out there, being curious, contacting people, even if they seem to be very famous, doesn't hurt. In the worst case scenario, you don't hear anything back. And I think the good thing about science is it is international. It might be challenging later on, but at an early stage, it's just so rewarding in so many levels. I think it's great to be able to travel the world, meet people, and make new experiences. So I would also encourage everybody to embark on this journey if it's something you think is going to be interesting for you. And yeah, if you have questions more specifically about Paris or biophysics in France, don't hesitate to contact me or Federica if you want to go back to Graz.
Thank you so much, Florian Müller, Federica Caforio, for taking the time. And I invite everyone to the next alumni postdoc on June 20. And Tina will now stop the recording. And we say goodbye to our audience.